I was thinking about how much I would be crying when I walked up here, because the film sort of rises in waves for us. But I think it's quite profound that you're saying, take your time, which is, I think, at the core of this film for you. So can you talk to us about that, how you know how to take your time so well?
The only way to make this kind of films is to fully embrace yourself in the process. Otherwise, I can't make them. So for this one, for example, it took 3 years. It was a very personal motivation. I've lost my own mother to dementia. And I think as most people, or a lot of people of us, might have to go through, it's a very tough process. Like, how do you go about that? How do you decide what to do? What is home care? What is care in general? And in the whole research of my conflicting ideas and expectations around that, seeing my father suffering, trying to give the care, I stumbled upon various solutions. Then I found Pomm, who suddenly gives me this whole other perspective on the story.
She gives us all another perspective on the story, right? And one of the things that I find so powerful is the way in which you allow the space for emotional states. And I'm curious about that in the way you thought about going into a scene like the Christmas party scene, which is just extraordinary. I think this moment with the puppy, the moment in which you are with this woman who seems to know exactly what is happening to her, right? And I'm just sort of curious about the way you think about emotional states and how you find them in the way that you film.
I think there's a whole thing of observation and really sitting in a scene even if nothing happens and wait, but it's a lot of conversation, I would say, maybe around it. Like the moments you see in the film is what is going around it. I was thinking about that watching it with you guys today. It's like there is a sound guy with his microphone on top. There is me filming, or there's a friend filming. I don't know if you agree, but it feels like that sort of everybody sort of knows. Well, we talked about that beforehand. It's like it's all coming to sort of a crux, and actually the whole team sort of subconsciously, physically knows, or all these bodies in this space suddenly know, like, okay, there's a point of no return.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about sort of how we are bodies when we make films, which is such a strange, I mean, I think there's such an interesting set of things going on in this film where we see that at this moment in history, we all have this capacity to attempt to communicate through screens, right? And this is a screen through which we're communicating, the kids looking at their phones, the mother attempting to talk to her children through a phone, and yet, you know, what happens when we are actually in physical proximity to each other. And that's when we're filming with people, we are quite close, right? We're ready to be quite close and to try to read what's not happening through words, but what's happening physically with a person's capacity to communicate. And so I think particularly in relation to dementia, certainly, but also just in relationship to love, right? Like this is a film about love in its many forms, and sort of love at this brink of impossibility, where there's impossibility. There's all kinds of impossibilities in the love. So I love this idea of like everyone sort of gathered around very closely to the person, trying to figure out how to see and feel what's happening.
I find also the whole thing of Pomm having the video diary. But initially it was the idea of, okay, we keep track on a story. Pomm can talk through the images. Whichever way they're shot, it's fine. And then you see Pomm taking that agency, and the excruciating moment where Nadia is crying in the very end, the little one, and Pomm she turns like, okay, we need to show
this. It's an amazing moment. Well, I think that's what's so amazing in the film, because both Pomm and you and, you know, the other camera person who you worked with have this capacity to stay with the challenge of the emotion. And I can tell you, like, that is not easy at all. I think most of us wish to look away, you know, in many ways, in these moments that are so excruciating. And so the thing of Pomm, I mean, that moment really killed me tonight, where she knows that we're seeing her pain, and then she just turns us and lets us see her daughter's pain. That sort of opening up of emotion that takes nerve to stay next to. And I was just curious about that for you. Do you feel like you were interested in making this film because it would allow you to stay more?
Take my time more, stay more, for sure. I mean, a friend telling me whose mother has Alzheimer's, the most beautiful thing is that you will be able to feed your parent one day. And I was like, really? Honestly? Really? And while making the film, sometimes we had to be off shooting, and then I was walking with Maya, for example, feeding Elisabeth, and I was like, oh yeah, I can do this as a filmmaker. But then, yeah, the day that I had to do it with my own mother was magical and stressful, and all of these emotions together. But we created a space. I think thanks to making the film, I was able to create a space, not only for myself, but for my mother, who knew I was making this film and knew I had to finish the film, and she found it very important. But also for my siblings and us,
and for all of us.
And for all of us.
Is there anyone who would like to ask Kristof a question?
I thought this movie was just stunning, and I have 10,000 questions and things to say, but I'm only going to say 3 things. I was curious, as the artist and the vision, you making this film, if you ever had in your mind or your mind's eye issues of surrogacy. So, you know, we look to Asia to begin life when we are infertile. And this was the first time I've ever seen that. I mean, I grew up in Asia, so I should know this, but I don't. So it's interesting to see now in a Western context, in Chelsea, in Manhattan, through this screen, we are looking to Asia to close life. And so what I thought was particularly stunning about your work is some sort of revolutionary or sort of subversive point where you allowed Pomm, who we don't really have a sense of where she begins or ends, to exist as a really strong character. Did you plan that? That was my question.
Did I plan that?
Yeah.
Pomm planned it, I guess.
Can I ask just one more thing? How did you find, how do you go about making something like this?
I'm going to steal Herzog's words, who says films are uninvited guests, but I kind of agree with that. So things come on your path. I mean, Maya was pure serendipity. I knew I wanted follow a patient, knowing that it would be a mother of 3 kids. Like Pomm is a mother of 3 kids. That's crazy. I would never expect that. So it's serendipity, and it's, I guess, knowing what I wanted, but then also hoping that all these things come together and they kind of do then or something. I don't know how it works.
This film is a contributor to opening up the space and time for us all to consider what we need to think about more as societies, to give people the chance to parent and be parented, and to be well and to be healthy with some kind of dignity, and actually how incredibly complicated and challenging that is. But I really want to thank you for sending us back out into the world today with the knowledge of what it means to actually touch other people, and to connect to that as we move forward. And this film is literally a film about touching. So thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.